Hello and welcome to Video Game Retrospective. I'm Jacob and it's time for another look at some of the best games you can play for a classic video game console. Today we'll be looking at the Atari 2600, a legend released in 1977 that has offered gamers great gaming experiences for decades. Now, not every Atari 2600 game holds up. There are certainly some stinkers out there, but there's a surprising number of good quality titles if you look around enough. Now, this is just a list of my personal favorite Atari 2600 games. Your favorites probably won't make the list. I'm sorry, especially to you Pitfall fans. Keep neglecting you, but it's not my thing. And of course, that means we're not going to be evaluating every single Atari 2600 game. I have not played all of them, but if it's made it into any of the big Atari or Activision collections, I've played it. Of course, it's just my list, so if you have different opinions on what the best games on the Atari 2600 are, let me know what your favorites are in the comments. But let's get into it. Number 5, Combat. What's that? The pack-in game that came with millions of 2600 consoles was actually good? Absolutely. Sure, Combat doesn't win any awards for complexity or impressive graphics, but it makes up for that with hours of variety, thanks to having a ton of different game modes. Even if its claim of having 27 different game modes is a bit of a stretch. The game is even more impressive when you remember that it was one of the first games ever made for the 2600. A lot of your programming tricks later developers had access to hadn't been discovered yet. This really was the perfect game to introduce brand new gamers to the possibilities of the 2600. Being able to just pop this single game in and experience some great arcade-feeling gameplay was wonderful for the time. And I do think that because of Combat being such a common game, it kind of gets overlooked, but it's very impressive. Number 4, Atlantis. You ever play Missile Command? Classic, right? Well, in my opinion, Atlantis is Missile Command, but better. Rather than shooting from a fixed position but with a free-moving cursor, you have 3 fixed places to shoot from, making the gameplay very twitchy. The game is an endurance test to see how long you can continually move between your 3 positions, killing enemy ships, and dealing with the fact that sometimes your positions get disabled until the end of the round. And if you lose, it signals the end of the entire Atlantean civilization. Your failure, your inevitable failure, will lead to the death of a civilization. It's pretty dark for a 2600 game, but the gameplay is fun. Number 3, Cubert. Cubert is one of those simple arcade games that you can find yourself coming back to over and over and over again. This particular port is quite impressive for the 2600, sporting pretty good graphics and fast gameplay. So many of your ports from the arcade felt like serious downgrades. Looking at you, Pac-Man. That's not the case here. This is basically the same game as the arcade version, just a little uglier. Which is fine, because the arcade game is great. You'll have no problem moving around, avoiding enemies, and changing all of the game's tile colors for points for hours. Great port. Number 2, River Raid. River Raid is awesome. It's one of the big titles for the 2600 that was original, not a port from the arcades. This game was one of the landmark titles in the vertical shooter genre, and offers a surprising amount of depth. You need to avoid or destroy ships, helicopters, and bridges while flying down the river while collecting fuel to keep going. Be careful though, since you can accidentally shoot the fuel pickups, losing them for good. This is not only one of the most liked games on the system, but one of the most forward-thinking. The next decade would be filled with games that owe a lot to this classic. Number 1, Berserk. Hey, look, a game that already plays super well on my Atari 5200 list. What a surprise. Now this port isn't quite as impressive as the 5200 version with its really cool voice synthesis, but it works very well. Like any other port of Berserk, the game nails the moment-to-moment choices you have to make, adjusting to the random design of each level, and the one-hit kill attacks that make this a tense but enjoyable experience. Well, that's my list. If you want some honorable mentions, we'll throw them in here as a bonus for those who stuck to the end. Pitfall's pretty good. I like it. Yar's Revenge is surprisingly good once you get over how outwardly weird it is. Always really liked Pole Position on the system. Super Breakout's pretty fun. Custer's Revenge, a classic game. Everyone loves that one. Yeah. Obviously, my list is not going to look the same as yours, so let me know down in the comments what games I'm overlooking. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And if you'd like to talk more about the Atari 2600 or any other classic video game console, make sure to join our Discord server where you can do just that. Also, if you'd like to support this show and help keep it running, you can check out our Patreon. And that's all I have for you guys today, so I'll see you next time.